Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E-Soup, and today we are starting Volume 4 of Case File. We just left off on a huge cliffhanger, and we have yet to find out what Xie Qingcheng is going to tell He Yu, or how the hell they're getting out of the flooding room that they're stuck in. So things seem pretty dire right now. Um, we left off on such a cliffhanger, and I'm so glad that we weren't stopping Case File for the time being after Volume 3. I'm very thankful that we're starting this today. Um, so we're reading chapters 89 through 92. Please have a look at the trigger warnings linked in the description, and please give the stream a like. And how is everyone feeling about what we're embarking on today? I'm still living off the high of actually being right about one of my theories last stream. Yes, Blue is back. Welcome back to the streams, Blue. Hello, Henry, and Blue, and Tina, and Sua, and Psykeen, and Nina. It's good to see all of you. Yeah, also, I'm at my parents' place currently, and I, of course, forgot the physical copy of the book, but I have a backup ebook copy. I can speak. So I will be reading from the ebook. So if anyone has the physical copy, if you want to announce, like, the page numbers of the chapters, that would be great. Because I can't tell you what page we're on, but I can tell you everything else. Oh, you know what? I'm going to do one thing because the internet here is actually very good and it's not crap, and I'm going to fix the bit rate of the video, so it's going to look better in a second. At least it should a little bit. I still had it set how I had changed it last time, which is like a super low bit rate because I was trying very hard to keep up with that last stream, which was a bit of a disaster. Okay, I fixed it now so it's more normal. Ooh, oh, thank you, Nina, for the page numbers. Oh, Henry, you got a jellyfish pin. Was your last purchase at the con. Oh, that's so cute. I think I actually have a jellyfish pin somewhere, like unrelated to Case File, of course, but either way, now everything jellyfish has to do with Case File. Henry E. Mustache in 4K. Alright, so I'm gonna get started because since we ended last stream, I've been very anxious to find out what Xie Qingcheng was going to say. So we are on chapter 89, his 13th year. If the truth is the last thing that I can restore to you, if this truth can give you some final relief. And He Yu just responds, ... I'll tell you. 19 years ago, Yanzhou. With his backpack slung over his shoulders, a 13-year-old Xie Qingcheng walked down a narrow residential street in the dead of winter. He held a Nokia phone with a green screen in his hand. This was the most expensive thing he owned. His parents were already several months gone. It took me a minute to fully register that we are talking about Xie Qingcheng's 13th year. For a second, I thought it was He Yu, and then I was like, wait a minute, no. Oh my god, we're getting Xie Qingcheng backstory. For these past few months, Xie Qingcheng had been like a lost soul, abandoned in the mortal realm. One shocking blow after another had left his heart hollowed out and rotted away. He had broken down and despaired. He had erupted into furious arguments countless times. But what was the point? He had startled awake in the middle of the night, over and over, jolted out of nightmares of the day he was told about his parents' deaths. That day, it had been pouring in Huzhou. He had been in his classroom taking a math test like any other ordinary student. Then his homeroom teacher had walked in, greeted the math teacher, and said a few words in a quiet voice. The math teacher immediately gasped in shock. The students only glanced up woodenly for a moment, the after images of equations and numbers drifting before their eyes, before they looked back down and continued to fight against the clock to complete the problems. Xie Qingcheng hadn't even looked up. He was checking his work on the very last major problem. The girl sitting next to him kept sneaking glances at him. She could have been trying to look at his answers, but she could equally have just been staring at this handsome boy's face. Suddenly, a shadow fell over Xie Qingcheng's test. Xie Qingcheng's pencil stilled. He looked up, frowning slightly when he saw that the person who had walked over to his seat was his homeroom teacher. He wasn't like the other students, and that was clear to see from his eyes. A pair of eyes that were keen, calm, and clear, rarely showing any signs of confusion or paralysis. No subject could stump him, and the pursuit of knowledge never seemed to torment him. Instead, he took everything on board with ease. No teacher could dislike a student like that. This was the first time that Xie Qingcheng had met his homeroom teacher's eyes and found her unsmiling. He started slightly in surprise. He didn't understand what was happening. He wasn't the type to get into trouble. Xie Qingcheng. The homeroom teacher patted his shoulder with a strange look on her face, like she was trying her best to repress something. Her thick glasses just happened to reflect the fluorescent lights, hiding most of her expression. But Xie Qingcheng could hear a faint tremor in her voice, like the lingering echo of a plucked string. Come out with me for a moment. This time, all the students were shocked. Their exam didn't seem important anymore, and they all craned their necks to watch as Xie Qingcheng followed the homeroom teacher out of the classroom. What's going on? Why is he getting called out right now? Do you think he did something wrong? Did he cheat? Don't be ridiculous, as if he needs to cheat. Everyone kept on muttering amongst themselves until the math teacher rapped on the table. What are you all whispering about? Focus on your tests. But after he scolded them, he couldn't help but stare after the two people who had disappeared into the hallway. If the students had looked closely, they would have seen that the math teacher's face had turned bloodlessly pale. Grabbing the thermos on his table with trembling hands, the math teacher opened it and took a gulp of warm water. The liquid heat flowed down his throat, but it barely warmed his chest, gone cold since he heard the news. He knew. It would be a very long time before Xie Qingcheng's heart would warm up again. Laoshe, did something happen? Xie Qingcheng felt compelled to ask as he followed the homeroom teacher up the stairs. The homeroom teacher remained silent until they reached the door to her office on the top floor. Before she pushed it open, she took a deep breath and turned around to look at the student she'd always been fond of. In the light cast through the windows from the dreary gray skies outside, Xie Qingcheng could see that the muscles in her face had gone tense, and he was stunned to find that, behind her thick glasses, there were tear tracks rolling down her face. Those tears were the ominous opening notes. The next moment, a roll of thunder shook the school building, raising the curtain to reveal the unfolding tragedy. Xie Qingcheng's heart stuttered in his chest. There are visitors for you inside. They'll tell you. The homeroom teacher's wrinkled hand settled on the door handle and pressed down. The door opened. Lightning flashed beyond the window, yet the dark atmosphere inside the room seemed even heavier than the clouds outside. Thunder and lightning cut through the towering rain clouds, just as Xie Qingcheng's steps into the room cut through the darkness there. A sea of navy blue. Police officers crowded like clouds gathering before the storm. At the head of the group was Uncle Zheng, who was closest to his parents. When they heard him come in, They all turned their heads, but nobody spoke. Instead, Xie Qingcheng heard his own voice, hollow like the shell of a forgotten cocoon left behind on a dead tree. What happened to my parents? There was no response. He spoke clearly, stayed fully composed, and asked again, Uncle Zheng, what happened to my parents? Xie Qingcheng didn't really remember listening to Zheng Jingfeng explain what had happened. But in his blurry memories, he remembered being extremely calm. So calm it was like he was already dead, as if the thing standing there listening was a clay sculpture or a corpse. It wasn't just that moment. For 2 weeks, Xie Qingcheng remained frozen and numb like a dead boy walking. He'd broken down and cried bitterly when he saw his parents' bodies with his own eyes, but in the dozen or so days that followed, he was like a machine, a symbolic stand-in, constantly signing, and signing one ruthless document after another. Cremation, inheritance, the death certificate. Living, breathing people became nothing more than words on paper, ashes in the furnace. His sister was still young. She didn't know much about the world, but she knew that Mommy and Daddy hadn't come home for a long time, and she threw a great sobbing tantrum and there were other things that Xie Qingcheng didn't even want to remember. When someone endured so much suffering that all the tears in their heart dried up, being able to properly feel sorrow was a great mercy granted by the heavens. Xie Qingcheng was unworthy of receiving even this bit of mercy. The car drove forward on its own, and its cabin exploded after it ran over its victims. How could it have possibly been an accident? It was as though both his body and spirit had been crushed beneath a massive weight, just barely held together by each passing breath. He kept running to the police station to try to get a hold of any of the uncles or aunties he knew, obstinately saying to them again and again, "My parents were murdered." I am just reading the chat. I'm not used to doing this with only one screen. I'm like just doing it off my laptop. Normally at home I have like 2 monitors. It's like when I do this here, at my parents' house, I remember how convenient that is because I'm just like, oh god, I have so many windows open. I didn't know we were getting angsty child Xie Qingcheng this stream. My parents were definitely murdered. I want to know the truth. Please help me uncover the truth. At first, these people were sympathetic and even shed tears for him. But as time went on, they grew annoyed by the child's incessant nagging. How many times have I told you? They'd say to him. We're investigating it carefully, but there's no evidence right now. We have to follow the proper procedures, all right? Give us a little more time. But how much was a little more time? Xie Jingcheng eventually learned that it was a full 19 years. Back then, he didn't know how long he would have to wait, but he already understood that there was no way for them to prove that his parents' deaths were anything other than a freak accident. There was no way for his mother and father to be buried in their uniforms and honored as heroes who had died in the line of duty. In the end, he could only pick out a snow-white dress shirt for his father. It was the nicest shirt his father had bought himself since their family fell on hard times. But his mother wore a qipao dress personally sewn by Li Miaoqing. The policewoman couldn't be sent off with the blaring sirens of a police car escort. But on the day of her funeral, not only her colleagues, but many of the people she'd helped over the course of her life, the rich and the poor, the criminals, and the victims alike, all came to pay their respects. She treated every life equally and never looked at anyone's soul through the tinted lens of discrimination. She had always been willing to reach out to those struggling in the depths of a quagmire, as long as they were willing to turn back. Thus, She earned their unconditional respect. But when she was buried, the question of her death still went unanswered. And so, Xie Jingcheng decided to investigate it himself. Even though he was just a middle schooler, even though the clues he had were very scant, he refused to abandon the chase. He used every spare moment to investigate the motive behind his parents' deaths. Perhaps the saying was true, that Providence never turned its back on those who persevered. He learned from an uncle at the police station that prior to his parents' car accident, they had visited an extremely shady nightclub in Yanzhou. As for what exactly they did and who they met, it was all kept secret, so no one knows for sure. But not long afterward, the higher-ups received multiple reports that they were both corrupt, that they'd accepted bribes. The reports even came with evidence, though not enough to truly support the claims against them. The higher-ups didn't rule out the possibility that someone was trying to frame them, but at the time, there was a crackdown going on, so they ended up getting demoted once again. Over these last few years, the two of them were suspended and investigated twice. All in all, they took part in a couple dozen major cases that involved some 100 individuals. If you want to look further, those 100 individuals are connected to maybe 1,000 more people. It would be impossible to investigate every single one. It'd be like looking for a needle in a haystack. The uncle clapped Xie Qingcheng on the shoulder. Don't worry about it too much, kiddo. We're still working on it. Leave it to us to find the answers to these questions. But Xie Qingcheng didn't know how long he would have to wait for the truth if he relied on them. Perhaps he would never see the day when the truth would finally come to light. And so, when winter vacation came around, he arranged a place for his little sister to stay and headed to Yanzhou alone, setting out for the nightclub that the uncle had mentioned. He wanted to see where this trail of clues would take him. That was when the accident happened. With considerable effort, he managed to reach a waiter who knew something of the situation. Although the man was very scared, he wasn't completely heartless. When he saw how pitiful the child was, he agreed to meet with him. They arranged to meet on a weekend afternoon in a small hot pot restaurant at the entrance of a narrow residential street. I don't know who they were meeting either. They were very secretive, and even our boss wasn't too clear about what they were doing. But I was in charge of cleaning up the private room, and after they left, I found an earring inside. You can take a look and see if it's your mom's. If it isn't, then maybe it belongs to whoever it was they were talking to. Before the waiter met with Xie Qingcheng, he had kindly texted him a photo. Back then, slow data transfer rates made downloads on Nokia phones very slow. When the photo finally finished downloading, Xie Qingcheng sat on the curb and tapped it open. It was an earring with a very peculiar design. The delicate gold earring had been fashioned in the shape of a cross made of bones, with a ring in the middle. The ring was inlaid with the tiny blood-red gemstone surrounded by 3 letters. R.I.P. Rest in peace. Even though phone displays back then were extremely low-res, similar in quality to the old analog AV cables, the exquisite make of that earring was still evident on the screen. Given its masterful craftsmanship and highly detailed design, it clearly wasn't a trinket one could buy at any random roadside stall. But famous jewelry stores like Chow Tai Fook or Lao Feng Xiang would never make an earring with such a baffling design. This is the earring. So Xie Qingcheng was already investigating, like, how, if someone could have framed his parents or what was going on before they even died. Because they were, like, suspended. I am processing. how far this mess goes back. The wearer likely had it custom made. Earrings were special in that their posts remained in contact with the wearer's ear for extended periods of time, rubbing against the person's sweat and secretions, even layers of their skin. If he brought this earring back to Zhang Jingfeng to be tested, perhaps the entire case would be blown wide open. To be honest, I'm not a good person. I'm an opportunist. When I found this earring, I was planning on selling it for some cash, so I didn't hand it over. But that day, when I heard you talking to my boss, I thought it might be better to give it to you. I know it's not much, but I lost my mom pretty early, too. I get it. Those few lines of text were the waiter's final words to Xie Qingcheng. Xie Qingcheng caught sight of the towering flames before he reached the hot pot restaurant where they'd arranged to meet that afternoon. Waves of sound and heat crashed into him. The crowd of observers was like an incoming tide. He rushed over, giving several elderly onlookers quite a fright as he did. "Hey-o, watch it, little buddy. What are you pushing us for?" "How impudent. Whose kid is this?" Xie Qingcheng didn't take in anything else that was said as he made his way to the very front of the crowd, right next to the police cordon. He watched the firefighters carry several bodies out of the building as jets of pressurized water pummeled the burning restaurant. He stood there frozen in place, the raging flames reflected in his eyes. He had come too late. Once the fire was extinguished, and they gave up on the rescue operation, the horror continued. He watched as corpse after corpse was carried out of the building, each wrapped in a stark white body bag. Overwhelming guilt washed over him. The feeling lunged toward him like a snarling tiger, hurtling out of the jungle, striking him in the heart, and roaring into his ear. For the first time, he realized just how childish, how simplistic, how meaningless his investigation was. He'd never even considered that it could bring harm to others. He felt like every single dead body was his fault. He crumpled into a sitting position at the intersection, his arms wrapped around himself, clenching that Nokia cell phone with the picture of the earring in his sweaty hand. Despair filled him. Condemnation struck soundly against his heart as he sat on the curb with his head bowed, like his soul had fled his body. And so, he didn't notice the black, privately owned car with fake plates parked on the street amongst the slowly dispersing crowd. A bearded man in a baseball cap sat inside, smoking a cigarette as he watched him from a distance. When Xie Qingcheng finally stood up and silently left the site of destruction, that car started up. It followed him as he boarded a bus headed for the place he was staying by the Outer Ring Expressway. After getting off at his stop, Xie Qingcheng still had to walk a long way to reach the hotel. He didn't have much money to spend, so the hotel was dilapidated and out of the way. Back in the 2000s, Yanzhou's surveillance camera system was still far from comprehensive, and the area near the Outer Ring Expressway was full of blind spots. In the darkness of night, the bearded man tugged the brim of his cap lower and spat out the butt of his cigarette. Gripping the steering wheel, he slammed down on the gas. And as the headlights flashed and the engine roared, he drove straight for Xie Qingcheng's back. Deathly silence followed. "I was hit by a car," Xie Qingcheng said to He Yu in the flooded film studio. It was the first time he'd ever fully revealed his untouched scars. "That man was probably supposed to kill me and dispose of my body, but I noticed at the last second and dodged to the side. So I didn't die on the spot. The wheels of the car ran over my legs again and again, and then I saw him get out of the car. But at that moment, A group of construction workers who had just gotten off work happened to pass by. The man didn't have the time to get me into the car before he fled the scene. He only managed to take my phone. Oh, he took his phone, so he doesn't have, like, that picture of the earring. Those workers brought me to the hospital. The doctors there said I was in critical condition. I was semi-conscious a couple times, but I couldn't feel my body. Xie Qingcheng relayed the story as though it were all trivial. I knew that I was about to die. He spoke of his suffering and near-death experience with complete indifference, as if it hardly mattered to him. It was only at the very end, when he mentioned the name of an older man, that emotion stirred slightly in his eyes. He said, "As I waited for my death, I met someone. Qin Xian." That's the end of the chapter. So, Qin Xian, he meets him as a kid. Qin Xian, it sounds like, was the doctor who saved him when he was a kid. That certainly puts a wrench in things. Blue. Okay, but can Yu retrieve a photo from 19 years ago that was on a phone that doesn't exist anymore? Yu, babe, show us your unrealistic hacking superpowers. Please, we need this photo of the earring. I need to know more about this. I need to know more about everything. Henry, I can't feel my face when I'm with you. The car running me over. Oh, God. Okay. Well, we are on chapter 90, if someone could say what page number that is. It is called His Secret. Qin Xian was the director of neurosurgery at the first affiliated hospital of Yanzhou University. He was still quite young for a doctor at the time. At age 45, he was at precisely the stage in his life where he possessed both sufficient knowledge and the daring to carve out his own path. He could tackle surgeries that were impossible for other doctors, and he wasn't afraid to take on cases that others wouldn't touch. He was revered with the entirely deserved title of Yanzhou's #1 neurosurgeon by patients and doctors alike. There really wasn't much difference between Qin Xian back then and Qin Xian at age 60. The 45-year-old Professor Qin was already the sort of person who didn't really follow the rules. When he accepted the case of the orphan Xie Qingcheng, a severely injured boy whose health insurance wasn't even registered in Yanzhou, he treated him just as he would Yi Beihai's mother in the future. He took on the case of a patient on the verge of death and defended him against all naysayers. Xie Qingcheng had more than 20 injuries all over his body. The most severe were to his legs and his spine. His spinal nerves had been almost completely destroyed. I'm shocked that he's not paralyzed. The doctors from other departments on the diagnostic team all said, even if your abilities as a surgeon are unsurpassed, Professor Qin, it will still be impossible to successfully treat this patient. Xie Qingcheng couldn't move as he lay on the hospital bed in the ICU, his entire body covered in tubes and incisions. The times he was awake, he heard the family members of other patients say, that poor boy. How terrible. Is there even a single part of his body that hasn't been damaged? I heard that his parents have passed away and there are no adult relatives they can reach. His medical expenses are being paid for by Professor Qin. Professor Qin is such a good person. Of course he is. But if you ask me, his child will only suffer if he survives. Even if he makes it, he'd still be paralyzed. Might as well pull the plug and end his troubles. Really, it's not that I don't have a conscience, but I remember my old man's last month before he died from lung cancer. He wasn't even comfortable lying down, and it took all the strength in his body just to breathe. Living like that is barely worth it. The... Oh, hold on. I just pressed something and moved forward a whole chapter, and I don't know... There we are. The IV drip swayed before his eyes, and the bedside monitor beeped next to his ear. Xie Qingcheng would often wake up briefly before falling back into a deep sleep for a very long time. Every time he woke, he tried his hardest to stay alert for as long as possible, afraid that if he closed his eyes, he'd never get to open them again. Every time he fell into that deep slumber, his subconscious struggled to yank him back from the path to the Yellow Springs through sheer will. I don't want to die. His chapped lips opened and closed as he muttered it over and over. At long last, he woke to see a middle-aged doctor at his bedside. The doctors all looked the same to him in their isolation gowns, but that day, when he lifted his eyes and the figure checking on him flooded his field of vision, it was as if a stroke of great fortune cleared the fog from his mind. He cried out in agony, "Dr. Chin." For a moment, the doctor froze. Then his masked face turned toward him, a pair of compassionate eyes meeting a pair that were filled with desperation. Xie Qingcheng had never seen Qin Xian before. He had only heard about his attending physician from others during his short bursts of consciousness. But at that moment, seeing that man for the first time, he knew that it must be him. This was the ordinary mortal, who was as strong as stone, as compassionate as Mother Earth, the one who guarded the gateway to eternal rest and grappled with the god of death. There's a footnote for Mother Earth. The characters in Qin Xian's given name are Ci, compassion, and Yan, stone. Okay, so strong as stone is compassionate as Mother Earth. The boy gazed at him in a daze, wanting to reach his hand out, wanting to move, but he couldn't do it no matter how hard he tried. He stared and stared, until tears streamed down his lacerated cheeks. "Dr. Qin, save me. Save me, please. I don't want to die. I can't die yet." The teenager sounded like a grievously injured kitten on the verge of death, wretched and pitiful. But beneath that pitifulness, there was a hint of something that other terminally ill patients didn't possess. Qin Xian's heart was struck by it. He noticed that the boy had finished by saying that he can't die, not just that he didn't want to die. At that moment, though, he didn't think too much of it. Worried that the patient's condition would worsen, he hastily tried to comfort him. "Everything's fine, child. Everything's all right. Focus on living and leave the rest to me. You still have me, child. I'll protect you. I'll save you." He grasped Xie Qingcheng's icy hand. Xie Qingcheng suddenly closed his eyes, tears streaming onto the pillow. "I'll protect you. You still have me." The man clasped the child's hand like a father returning to the mortal realm in the wake of a torrential downpour, holding a son who was still struggling bitterly in search of an answer in the world of the living. How long had it been? Xie Qingcheng thought back to the day when Zheng Jingfeng and the other officers had notified him of his parents' accident, remembered following the police cars to the scene afterward. The crime scene had been very close to the school, and when he got there, the forensic investigators were still collecting evidence from the bodies. Zheng Jingfeng had asked them to cover the bodies with white cloth, but Xie Qingcheng arrived before the investigators could get there. He had seen his parents with his own eyes, their crushed bodies and shattered epaulets. It was at that moment, seeing that ghastly sight, that he truly understood. His mother and father were really gone. They would never come back. He lost control completely. His parents' coworkers held him back and kept him from rushing over, but he broke down and cried in front of everyone at the scene. standing before his parents' broken bodies. That was the last time he had shown any sign of childlike weakness. Xie Chingcheng never cried like that ever again. Even during the cremation service and the sorrowful funeral, where he bid his parents farewell, he didn't shed another tear. He knew that their family's older generation was gone. From that day on, the first person who would need to stand up and face all the world's sufferings, torments, dangers, and even death would be him. As the eldest in the family, he needed to protect those standing behind him. It was only now, in the hospital bed, that Xie Chingcheng had received another glimmer of mercy from the heavens. He was allowed to be that 13-year-old child again. Tears coursed endlessly down his cheeks. A full 6 months after his father passed on, someone finally took his hand and said with complete sincerity to this 13-year-old child, "I'll protect you." Drowning in pain and helplessness, Xie Chingcheng called in a voice choked with emotion, "Dad, are you back? Please don't leave. Don't go out again. It's raining." "It's raining so hard, Dad. I don't want you and Mom to leave again. Don't go. I'm begging you. Come home." Qin Xian froze. Xie Chingcheng mumbled vaguely for a little longer, and then slipped back into unconsciousness. He didn't see that, at that moment, Qin Xian's eyes were wet. On the eve of the Lunar New Year, when he miraculously hung on for more than 10 days, Xie Chingcheng's condition suddenly and rapidly deteriorated. As he was being wheeled into the trauma bay, he watched the nightscape flickering by through the hallway windows in a daze. It was snowing in Yanzhou. Snowflakes the size of goose feathers floated and drifted through the air. He'd always lived in Jiangnan, so he'd never seen this kind of snow before, glittering brightly. "My little sister's name means snow," he murmured. "She's only 5. She's so little." The surgery had preserved Xie Chingcheng's life for the time being, but the administrators of the first affiliated hospital of Yanzhou University decided that they couldn't continue to treat the child. This was a patient who was liable to die at any moment. He ought to be sent home. It would be better for him than dying in some unfamiliar place. Of course, there were other reasons, but they didn't sound nearly so dignified. Despite Qin Xian's celebrated reputation, he had yet to reach a position where he could stand against the majority. The hospital director sought him out to talk about it as if he wanted an open discussion, but in reality, the decision was already set in stone. When Xie Chingcheng was forcibly transferred out of the first affiliated hospital of Yanzhou University, Qin Xian contacted an old acquaintance in Huzhou and arranged for him to stay at a private hospital. The day he was admitted to the hospital, Qin Xian personally attended to all his needs. No one knew why he paid so much attention to this child. Perhaps Qin Xian admired the impressive strength of this child's willpower. Perhaps this pitiful fate inspired Professor Qin's unprecedented compassion. Or perhaps the sorrowful "dad" that a barely conscious Xie Chingcheng had uttered reminded him that he, too, was a father. If he died, and something like this happened to his daughter, how much would his heart ache as he watched from the heavens? Or perhaps he didn't finish the thought, because the youth suddenly called out to him, "Professor Qin, am I going to survive?" Xie Chingcheng lay on the bed in the private hospital in Huzhou. He had wasted away so dramatically that his body was barely there. His thin frame barely disturbed the thick blankets. His entire person was haggard and defeated. But those dark eyes were still so bright, their gaze unwavering as they met Qin Xian's. "I don't want my little sister to become an orphan. I don't want her to live in an orphanage. Please save me. No matter what it takes, I'll do anything. I'm begging you." After struggling with himself for days on end, Qin Xian finally came to a decision. He, he was going to do something extremely risky. He and Xie Qingcheng were basically the only people who knew this. They'd even kept it hidden from Qin Xian's wife and daughter. But while Qin Xian was in America, he'd met many prodigiously talented pharmaceutical researchers, one of whom was an old schoolmate he was quite close with. This schoolmate worked at a life sciences research institute in America and oversaw a project on cell regeneration. That's what the cell regeneration is. What is it? The Emperor, the something Emperor has to do with, and RN13. That's what that's supposed to do. Like, I was not expecting this connection. Good question, Blue. Why are the authorities allowing this 13-year-old to have full custody of himself and his baby sister? There is a lot of things that I'm like, wait, what? But like his connection to Qin Xian, and then Qin Xian having a connection to the cell regeneration thing, I'm like, this is getting... It's meat bun, so I should expect anything. I don't know why I'm surprised. Cell regeneration was a towering obstacle in the human quest to conquer illness and death. Once, strolling down the streets of Brooklyn together, that former schoolmate said to Qin Xian with an air of profundity, "We've made more progress down that road than any other institution in the world." At the time, that old schoolmate had wanted Qin Xian to stay in America and work with him on his project. He'd originally had an extremely capable physician on his team, but that researcher had died during a lab accident a few years earlier. I'm side-eyeing everything. Lab accident? Are we sure it was an accident? And while his position had been filled, the abilities of his replacements were unfortunately rather lacking. Qin Xian's old schoolmate was eager to recruit him. However, Qin Xian wasn't interested in such extreme, risky research projects, so he tactfully declined his schoolmate's invitations every time. Despite the rejections, his schoolmate asked his superiors for permission to give Qin Xian a tour of one of the company's laboratories before the latter's departure. There were several patients in that lab, all suffering from different grave afflictions, who had volunteered to serve as research subjects. There, Qin Xian witnessed firsthand the astonishing restorative powers of the unique drug called RN13. When he leaned over to examine the effects of RN13 on the skin regeneration of a severe burn victim, his former schoolmate asked him with a smile, "What do you think? Have you changed your mind? This kind of drug might alter the course of medical history. Lao Qin, surely you're far too impressive to spend your whole life as a doctor." Qin Xian adjusted his glasses and straightened up. He looked at the test subject, who was clearly homeless, and then said, "I'm not very fond of your methods. Granted, this type of research might be legally acceptable in this state, but you know me." He smiled courteously at his old schoolmate. "I'm an ordinary person, and a coward. I prefer to go by the book, researching and prescribing drugs according to established rules. It would be very difficult for me to be like you. To be how should I put it? An innovator? I'm very sorry, but this is my final decision." He Yu's expression changed the moment he heard RN13. That was the name of the drug that Lu Jishu had taken when she was pregnant with him. The drug that had saved her life. His father had told him it was a type of drug that had been developed to harness the power of cell regeneration, and that, in a way, it truly was a miracle drug that could bring people back from the brink of death. But modern medicine hadn't reached that stage yet. RN13 was severely unstable, and there were grave risks in taking it. It hadn't been reviewed by any ethics boards, nor had it undergone large-scale animal testing. Needless to say, clinical trials were severely lacking. After taking RN13, Liu Jishu's physical appearance had begun to distort, and her personality changed dramatically. Even the child she carried suffered serious side effects, as He Yu's nervous system exhibited abnormalities from birth. Then, when he grew older, it was confirmed that he suffered from the rare disorder psychological Ebola. These were all consequences of using RN13. He Yu couldn't help but ask Xie Qingcheng, are you also? After that kind of a car accident, no ordinary person could stand again, have their wounds healed and their appearance restored, have their cells regenerated. Xie Qingcheng said, "That's right. In order to save me, Qin Xian broke his own rules. He asked those Americans for a full dose of RN13. Under the pale cold light, he slowly closed his eyes. And as for me, I took all of the medication. You took RN13? Then you... Even He Yu's voice was shaking. Are you... The words that He Jiwei once said seemed to echo through He Yu's ears again. But RN13 wasn't a fully developed drug to begin with. It was too ambitious. The problem of cell regeneration is the biggest challenge in human disease. With the limitations of modern medicine, it's completely impossible. It was true that this drug had powerful regenerative capabilities, to the point that it could even reverse organ damage, thus allowing the patient to recover. But its side effects became apparent in both your and your mother's bodies. Even though the pharmacist prescribed a very small dosage and administered it in a very cautious way, it was still impossible to avoid. Your illness was caused by RN13. He Yu suddenly flipped upright in the water and grabbed Xie Qingcheng by the arm. At this point, they were only half a meter away from the ceiling. You guys, I'm processing, and I'm wondering what this means. If this could mean that Xie Qingcheng has psychological Ebola too. Blue and I were like just discussing that possibility, and I didn't think we would get anything possibly indicating that so soon. Blue, oh, I know how it changed him. He's now an Omega. Oh God. And Henry, so were they having this talk lying face up in the water, starfish style, until now? Oh God, okay. Every new page, I'm like, what are we going to learn? Only a single step away from death. And it was only at this very last step that Xie Qingcheng was finally willing to tell him the truth. He Yu felt like even the marrow in his bones had gone cold, but not because of his impending fate. His pupils contracted. Xie Qingcheng's eyes were still closed. He didn't look He Yu in the face. The hair scattered over his forehead was covered in glistening drops of water, and one droplet slid from the tail of his eye, falling into the damp hair at his temples. Xie Qingcheng went on. I took a higher dose of RN13 than anyone else. In our country, the medical records include case numbers 1, 2, 3, and you, number 4. You were all affected by this drug and became psychological disturbed. Hold on, first off, I hadn't thought about that. I had thought, oh, maybe psychological Ebola is caused by different things. It didn't even occur to me that everyone who has psychological Ebola is because of RN13. But have you ever noticed that there's a case missing from those listed? Hello, case file compendium. Medical cases aren't documented starting from 1, but rather from 0. I wasn't the first person to take RN13, but I was the first to complete the entire course of treatment. Like the collapse of a colossal mountain, massive boulders tumbled down and rent heaven and earth. Huyu's pupils had contracted to dots. It felt as though Xie Chingchung's words were coming from somewhere far, far away. I'm the same as you. Okay, hold on. I gotta breathe. I'm the same as you. I'm a psychological Ebola patient. The only other one still alive in this country who can completely control their mental state, whose mind has conquered the disease. My case was designated the first. You paled abruptly. You're the first emperor? Yeah, the emperor was supposed to be a simulation, but I think there was some question of like what if the emperor was a real person. I think that came up with the like evil lady and the woman in the wheelchair little aside that we got a while back, but I was just I was talking to Blue about this because what happened, and I said this to Blue, is that I was like, okay, I guessed that Xie Chingchung had a mental illness and could be possibly controlled by Yu with the blood stuff, blood toxin or whatever. But what I didn't guess, it honestly didn't occur to me. I wasn't like, what if Xie Chingchung also has psychological Ebola? That did not occur to me. But then at some point I Googled, like, I was Googling, like, cover art of one of the volumes or, like, a release date or something. I don't remember. But I Googled something about case file, and I saw, like, in the Google thing, there's, like, questions that people ask. And there was, like, other questions, and it was like, does Xie Chingchung have psychological Ebola? And I was like, I am not clicking on that. And then I was like, that did not even occur to me. Honestly, until, just then. Blue. I'm glad we didn't need to live with this semi-spoiler for long. Yeah, Blue, you said that, oh, if it's on Google like that, then it must be true. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe people just wonder about that, and enough of them have asked. But, yes, apparently so. And not only does he also have it, but he's like patient 0. And again, it didn't even occur to me that RN13 was the cause of all the cases. I was not even thinking about that. I need to process some things, and the connection to Qin Xian. And then my question too is, who is this colleague of Qin Xian's? Because I was thinking, like, could that be Yu's father or someone else that we know? I don't know. Right. I saw it coming, but I didn't imagine that he's patient number 1 or that the Emperor simulation can be found up Xie Chingchung's ass. Right. Henry, I'm sorry that you had to hold on to that spoiler for so long. That's a lot. Like, no wonder Yu's father wanted him specifically to treat Yu. Yeah, now I'm so curious about if that colleague, if that person is Yu's father. Maybe. or just like what his connection to this is. But that means that He Yu's father must have known that Xie Jingcheng also had psychological Ebola, and he was like, yeah, you're going to be the doctor. This just opens up like a whole can of everything. Blue, right? But does that mean that Xie Jingcheng has all the powers? Is he Thanos? Oh, Lord. Oh, by the way, while we're here, please look at my parents' mug of, wait, let me see if the camera has it. It's, my parents' dog, Kenzie, as a stormtrooper. um, yeah, so it's time to take a break, and I'm just, um, continuing to process that. I, I do I understand why Seven Seas ended the last book where they did. And again, I'm so glad that we like were continuing this book series at the moment and didn't like stop for a break after book 3 because that would have been awful. Um, but yeah, so I'm gonna take a break and I will be back in about 10 minutes. Also, if anyone has any like favorite or notable quotes from like between, I don't know, mid book 2 through the end of book 3, that you want to like drop in the Discord or something, because I have not updated the little quote thing in like a very long time and I need to do that. Yes, Blue, let's just hope that the volume 4 cliffhanger treats us gently. Yeah, for real. All right, so I will go and I will be back shortly. Hi, hello, I am back. I am back and I'm still processing what we just learned. I seriously, I, uh, I've just been having a moment because I can't believe I was just talking about the possibility of Xie Ching Chung having psychological Ebola with Blue, like earlier today, and Meatbun comes in and is like, "You're gonna learn about this today." I thought that if that was the case, it was going to be kept secret from us for longer. So this is nice, honestly. I do wonder what other twists and turns there's going to be in the following six volumes, but we know this now. That it's just absolutely I just can't. I just cannot. Yeah, so like we're still when you put it that way, it's like we're still so far from the end. Like what is even going to happen? Um I have seen those book covers. Like what in the world? Yes, exactly what I'm saying, Henry. This does make me worry about what she's going to do for the rest of the story. Like okay, we've already had these twists and we know this now. What what can even what can even happen at this point? And yet, so many things. And now, it makes sense. It especially makes sense now why the organization is knows about Xia Ching Chung and has it out for him, I think is the wrong. I think maybe they want to capture him, or I don't really know if he himself is the emperor, whatever it's called, then they would want to capture him and I don't know, do experiments on him or something. I don't really know what. Maybe his psychological Ebola comes with some sort of power that they can use. He's Blue, exactly. Can't believe I said like 2 hours ago that I would be keeping my eyes peeled for any sign that Xie Jingtong has physical has has psychological Ebola. I almost said physical Ebola because I was looking at PE and in my head that's like physical education. um yes, Meat Bun is laughing at us. So, we are on chapter 91. Nina said that is page 35. His dream recast. Xie Jingcheng stared at He Yu. You know about the first emperor? My dad told me, but He Yu stared closely at Xie Jingcheng's pale face. He Jiwei's words swam through his head. No normal person could endure the torment of a full course of treatment with RN13. The first emperor was only a digitally simulated person. By simulating a person who had taken a full course of RN13, the data showed the efficacy of treatments for various diseases. So in being the first person fully treated with it, he was also a test subject for them at the same time. Xie Jingcheng seemed to know what he was going to say. He calmly replied, "Everyone thinks that the first emperor isn't a real person, that it's a virtual human and that all the test data is generated through calculations. But that's not true. No computer simulation could be that accurate. The person who underwent RN13's full treatment process, that was me. But besides the two of us, there's only one other person who knows this, and he's already gone. He was the one who used this method to save me." His words were devastating, So yes, I'm the first. That is, the one that everyone calls the first emperor. Once again, time rewound to 19 years ago. Or rather, 18 years ago. The Lunar New Year had already passed. As the first apricot blossoms of spring quietly unfurled, Xie Qingcheng recovered and was discharged from the hospital. Over the course of 3 long months of treatment, he had been immersed in a tank of fluid and connected to an oxygen chamber, taking RN13 continuously. I have a question, which is I wonder what they told Xie Shui during this time period. Because from what I can tell, Xie Shui doesn't seem like she knows that Xie Qingcheng has, anything particular wrong. I mean, she didn't even know that, Yu had psychological Ebola. Unless she's just very good at, like, hiding what she knows. I don't know. But it kind of seems to me like she might not even know this. So I wonder what they even told her was going on with his treatment or what was happening to him while she's just, you know, around, hopefully being taken care of somebody while her brother is in a tank of fluid for 3 months. Within the specimen tank, Xie Qingcheng endured an inhumanly torturous medical procedure, a full course of treatment with RN13. As a subject in a secret research study, he became yet another person whose life was saved by RN13. But as the saying went, a gift bestowed by fate always came with a hidden cost. Xie Qingcheng's recovery was astonishing. He was young and in excellent health to begin with, so the regeneration of his cells was far more successful than any of the previous cases. However, there were still some subtle changes. It was as if his surface regeneration had used up too much of his life force. After his wounds healed, he began to scar very easily, so that even a gentle pinch would cause a red welt on his skin. He developed allergies, not just to mango, but to many other things as well. For example, while he could drink quite a bit without getting drunk, his body couldn't tolerate the alcohol itself. He would feel burning hot all over, his strength sapped away. And there was also the matter of his physical strength. Xie Qingcheng had once been a formidable athlete, a martial arts champion and skilled wrestler known for his explosive power and endurance. That's so... when he was like 13, even as a child, he'd put great effort into his training, knowing it would be necessary to attain his ultimate goal of becoming a police officer. Okay, that makes sense why he did that. But although RN13 let him regain normal, everyday mobility, training at such a high level was now impossible. He was still talented, but he could no longer be the very best. A person's body can only perform a finite number of metabolic processes over their lifetime. Think of it as spending 20 or 30 years of your lifespan in advance in exchange for your current health, Qin Xian had said to him. There's no way you can be a police officer in the future. You must look after your health carefully. Otherwise, your body will deteriorate much more quickly than normal. I'm just thinking about the fact that he smokes like a pack a day. Yikes. It sounds cruel when I say it like this, but this will impact the rest of your life, so I need to tell you the truth. Xie Qingcheng, your life expectancy may only be 40 years or so. God, he really is an old man at 32. If you don't take your health seriously, you could die from organ failure before you even make it to 40. Sir, why do you smoke? Sitting on the neatly made, snowy white hospital bed, Xie Qingcheng calmly listened as Qin Xian spoke these words to him. Words that no other person on earth would ever be privy to. Spring sunshine glimmered through the glass window panes, spilling into the clean, tidy ward and illuminating Xie Chingchung's crystal clear face. RN-13 was truly beyond ordinary human comprehension. His body showed no visible traces of the calamitous accident he'd survived. The only scar that remained was a tiny red mole on the nape of his neck, a residual blemish marking the site where the cytolytic drugs had been injected into his spinal cord while he was immersed in medicinal solution for 3 full months. It was as though all his suffering had been a nightmare that hadn't left a single trace behind, aside from that spot of cinnabar, a spot that would never fade away. Xie Qingcheng returned home. Moyu Alley in early spring was filled with tiny golden flowers in full bloom. Countless sprays of blossoms turned into waterfalls of gold spilling over the walls, their petals falling like pearls of rain with every gust of wind. Auntie Li and Xie Shui were waiting for him beside a wall of flowers. Thank God for Auntie Li, being there to take care of the kids, to take care of Xie Shui. Blue is the most sensitive meat bun, I see you. As soon as they saw him, the woman covered her face with her hands and wept, while the girl's face broke into a huge smile, revealing a missing baby tooth. Guga, pick me up. None of them knew what exactly had happened in Yanzhou. At first, it was because Xie Qingcheng didn't have any identifying documents on his person, and they couldn't ask him too many questions when he was almost always unconscious. Later on, the doctors and nurses learned that his parents had already passed, and since he didn't have any close adult relatives to speak of, they didn't know whom to contact. And after that, Xie Qingcheng had been transferred to a private hospital and became a test subject for RN-13. This was something that absolutely could not be divulged. Qin Ciyan had taken an immense risk to treat him, so Xie Qingcheng understood that this was a secret he needed to take to the grave. To fill in the several-month gap, he told everyone that he had simply undergone nerve block therapy. There was no need to worry. And why did I just scroll and lose my page? Where? Okay. Xie Qingcheng took little Xie Shui from Auntie Li's arms. No one knew that he had given up 30 years of his life for this. A tender reunion on a gentle spring day. Xiao Xie, does it hurt? Did it leave any scars? It doesn't hurt, he said. As for scars, nothing visible. It's not so bad, Auntie Li. Guga, kiss. Xie Shui was still much too young. No matter how much she'd wailed and sobbed when he left, she was still overjoyed the moment she was back in those familiar arms, her smile unfolding like a flower. She clung to Xie Qingcheng's neck with her warm hands. I want kissies. Xie Qingcheng turned his face to the side. His little sister kissed his pale, nearly transparent skin, right on the flesh that had been a horrifying, mangled mess just a few months earlier. In the cool breeze, the little girl gently lowered her lashes. As if sensing something, she carefully touched Xie Qingcheng's face. Guga, it won't hurt anymore. From that day forward, Xie Qingcheng abandoned his investigation into the truth behind his parents' deaths. The truth was very important. It would never be meaningless. But more important than the truth was life itself. He had paid with his health, his dreams, his longevity. He had shed blood and tears to return to the world of the living, a world filled with Xie Shui's tinkling laughter. He knew that he would always feel shame for failing the departed. He could give them neither the truth nor an explanation. But he couldn't let down the living again. There were almost 30 years until he turned 40. He just wanted to live well until then. And so, with that in mind, he turned on the lamp in the middle of the night and picked up a pen, spreading out a detailed plan before him. as he calculated his and Xie Shui's ages. He thought that if he could live peacefully until the age of 40, he really wouldn't have anything to regret. The last words he wrote in the open notebook were, "Me, 40, Xie Shui, 32. She should be married by then. I'll have nothing to worry about." Xie Qingcheng turned around to see his young sister curled up on her little bed, sound asleep, hugging her teddy bear, thin blanket kicked off and onto the floor. He closed the notebook and walked over to her bed, tucking her back in. At first, he thought that his days would all pass peacefully, just like this. But he had yet to pay the full price that RN13 demanded for his rebirth. Far from it. Xie Qingcheng soon found that his body was withering much faster than expected. Although his mind was still sharp, physically, it was a completely different story. In the 2 months after he returned home, he had multiple high fevers. And when his temperature surged, he was disturbed to discover a thirst for blood and violence. He wanted to destroy things, wanted to ruin himself. Even more terrifyingly, he realized that his senses had begun deteriorating rapidly. Pain, stimulation, what had once been highly distinctive sensations became more and more difficult to feel. Once, he accidentally cut his hand. The wound was deep, slicing through flesh and dripping with blood, but incredibly, he didn't feel much pain at all. His temper also grew more and more uncontrollable. He often became inexplicably angry over trivial things. A few times, he even got mad at Xie Shui for simply fussing about wanting chicken soup wontons. Terrified, the little girl froze in place as she was scolded, her throat thick. Then, after a long while, tears began to roll in huge droplets down her face. "Wah, Guga, why are you being so mean? You're not Guga. You're not Guga." When Xie Qingcheng thought back on it, he knew Xie Shui had probably meant that her older brother wouldn't treat her that way, that he had always been very patient when taking care of her. But for some reason, at that moment, a malevolent fire sparked to life in his chest. He had been feeling unsettled by these strange changes for a while, to the point that when he looked in the mirror, he felt frightened by the unfamiliar person staring back at him. Xie Shui's harsh words had not just stabbed into his ears, but through his heart as well, piercing it until it shuddered. He turned abruptly, with a twisted expression on his face. "That's right. I'm not your brother. Your brother is dead. He should have died a long time ago. Why am I still alive? Why am I suffering so much just to keep living? Is it for myself? Is it so you can criticize me like this?" His face was frantic, deranged. Xie Shui was terrified into dazed silence, unable to utter another word. In her wide, vacant eyes, Xie Qingcheng saw his own reflection. He looked like a ghost who had been resurrected into someone else's body. Each time this happened, once he sobered up again, he felt incredibly remorseful. He couldn't comprehend why he would do such things. He wondered if he'd lost his mind. His moments of unhinged madness became increasingly frequent, and during each flare-up, he would lose more control, and his emotional state would fall to new depths. He realized that something was wrong. Perhaps that drug had some unanticipated side effects. After yet another mental collapse, Xie Qingcheng curled up helplessly for hours, shuddering against the lingering pain, then finally dialed the number that Qin Xian had left him. This was the first time Qin Xian heard that RN13 could cause psychological symptoms. He immediately flew back to Huzhou and took Xie Qingcheng to undergo a series of examinations. All of his levels were normal, but Xie Qingcheng was still ill. At the time, the psychological disorder caused by RN13 didn't have a name, and there were no detailed case studies. Consequently, Qin Xian believed that Xie Qingcheng was simply under too much stress. He referred him to a psychiatric hospital in Huzhou for psychotherapy. The doctor there could hardly be called irresponsible. The course of treatment he prescribed was systematic and by the book. Xie Qingcheng took copious amounts of psychiatric medication. Some of the drugs made his mind slow and sluggish, muddling his thoughts. But they were fundamentally incapable of alleviating his emotional suffering. But once he stopped taking them, he would only grow even more depressed, even more unhinged. The days went on until finally, Xie Qingcheng couldn't stand it anymore. He had always been tenacious, never allowing physical pain to wear him down. But in the end, the psychological torment was what destroyed him. On a dark, stormy night, heavy with desolation, after another flare-up where he frightened Xie Shui to tears, after hearing once again that the police bureau hadn't made any progress, Xie Qingcheng finally broke down. Mental illness was like an omnipresent demon, capable of rotting away the heart of a formerly indomitable young man. Xie Qingcheng's cognitive faculties didn't even seem to belong to him anymore as he took hold of a knife and pressed it to his wrist. Is that where he got the tattoo later? I want to live. I want to see her grow up. Dr. Qin, can you save me? That resolute voice already seemed like an echo from another lifetime. The blade slashed down ruthlessly. The slash was very deep, sending blood spurting out. Xie Qingcheng closed his eyes. As it turned out, to someone whose heart had endured so much torment, dying was incredibly easy. Blood dripped from the wound. In the middle of the night, at the mouth of a deserted alley, beneath the wide eaves blocking the curtain of rain, Xie Qingcheng closed his eyes and allowed his life to drain out of that wound, drop by drop. He felt like he was no longer Xie Qingcheng. He was only an empty shell, a rotting carcass. Xiaoxie, Xiaoxie. He vaguely made out the shape of a man getting out of a taxi. That man was tall and imposing and held a large black umbrella. He looked so much like his father. Qin Xian could never have imagined that his return to Huzhou, simply passing Xie Qingcheng's house on the way from the airport, would show him such a sorrowful scene. He rushed out of the car and reached out a hand to the youth sitting curled up on the steps. What are you doing? Doesn't that hurt? Xie Qingcheng lifted his head to look at him, like a small animal without a home. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Qin Xian propped him upright and lifted him onto his back. The doctor tilted the umbrella, paying no mind to the torrential rain soaking his clothes, as he carefully adjusted it to cover the child lying across his shoulders. Let's go. It's going to be okay. I'm taking you to the hospital. Yeah, Blue, that's what I was just thinking. Meat Bun, do not dare mention homes to me. Oh, doesn't that hurt, is what Qin Xian said to him. And then he said, doesn't that hurt to you? I didn't even think about that somehow. I'm taking you to the hospital, Xiaoxie. Hang in there. From that day onward, Qin Xian knew that Xie Qingcheng's illness wasn't an ordinary psychological issue. He gave his old schoolmate in America a call. After listening to his story, his schoolmate flipped through the relevant medical records to discover that similar cases had appeared among subjects who had taken the drug in America. But none of those people had lived very long. Their bodies and minds were ravaged too severely. In the end, they spent every waking moment struggling against the most negative human emotions. Emotional despair was even more frightening than physical pain. When their conversation ended, Qin Xian stood alone on his porch for a very long time. He truly liked Xie Qingcheng very much, Anyone who had witnessed that child's perseverance and maturity would find it impossible not to like him. If anyone could ultimately conquer the suffering of the human heart, Qin Xian thought it would surely be Xie Qingcheng, as long as he had someone who could genuinely understand and care for him. By coincidence, Qin Xian had been temporarily transferred for work. He could remain in Huzhou for over half a year. And so, he made a decision. He decided to keep Xie Qingcheng by his side, to treat him like his adopted son. However, this matter couldn't be made public. After all, if his colleagues at the first affiliated hospital of Yanzhou University found out that Xie Qingcheng was the child from that disastrous car accident, he would surely come under investigation. RN-13 was a prohibited drug, so never mind Qin Xian's career. Xie Qingcheng would face the terrifying threat of becoming a research subject. Because of that, hardly anyone knew about the close relationship between Qin Xian and Xie Qingcheng. Qin Xian was half a father to Xie Qingcheng. He gave Xie Qingcheng a new life, gave a youth on the brink of death the courage to live on. He gave this dead boy whose soul had rotted away a new sense of meaning. Over the course of those long months that they spent in each other's company, Qin Xian became Xie Qingcheng's psychological pillar. No matter what negative emotions Xie Qingcheng experienced, Professor Qin accepted them all and soothed them. Qin Xian's wisdom, his erudition, and selfless healing also gave Xie Qingcheng, who had lost his dream, a radiant new gleam of light. He couldn't become a policeman, but perhaps he could become a doctor like Qin Xian. I'm just continuing to think about the fact that Qin Xian later is killed, and Xie Qingcheng, for reasons we still don't know, paid that woman to act out a whole scene and said things that were insulting to Qin Xian. And he obviously did it for a reason. And I'm just thinking about how hard that must have been for him to do, considering. As days turned into months, Qin Xian taught Xie Qingcheng to regulate his emotions with painstaking patience, while simultaneously taking him under his wing as a scholar, guiding him on the path to become a doctor. Just as He Yu had immersed himself in hacking, the young Xie Qingcheng found a distraction he could focus on by burying himself in his studies. Using this method, he was gradually able to bring his symptoms under his control. Qin Xian gave him the opportunity to study at his friend's research institute as an ordinary student. That chance was the encouragement he needed to keep conquering his hardships. That research institute was sponsored by He Jiwei. No one knew that Qin Xian and Xie Qingcheng were close. They behaved indifferently in front of other people, like acquaintances who only ever nodded to each other in passing. Whenever Qin Xian wanted to give Xie Qingcheng an academic opportunity, he did so under the pretext that he was organizing special interest groups for the younger generation, rather than directly asking his friends to allow Xie Qingcheng to join their research labs. Meanwhile, Xie Qingcheng never failed to live up to Qin Xian's high expectations. A prodigy through and through, he quickly understood and mastered every new concept that came his way. It was as if RN-13 had made him even smarter. Over the course of the next decade, Xie Qingcheng learned more than any ordinary person possibly could have as he followed in Qin Xian's footsteps. In addition to medicine, Xie Qingcheng also achieved astonishing distinction in the life sciences. He even began to privately research adjuvant drugs for RN-13, and, as a psychological Ebola patient, started investigating the pathology of the disease. And then one day, Xie Qingcheng had an unexpected realization. he himself would make an excellent test subject. Since he had taken the full course of RN13, thereby being designated as the first case, his body could handle pharmaceutical testing that no ordinary person could endure. Through those experiments, he could seek answers to research problems related to many common illnesses, leading to new treatments. Just like Shenong testing hundreds of herbs on his own body. And that comes with the footnote. Shenong, the god of agriculture, tasted hundreds of medicinal herbs to determine their uses. In some stories, his experimentation is said to have eventually killed him. Xie Jingcheng felt like his short life might not be meaningless after all. He could no longer be the Xie Jingcheng of the past. He'd been forced to abandon his first dream and gave up his pursuit of the truth behind his parents' deaths. But at least he was no longer useless. He could let scarlet stamens bloom from his suffering, let his own life be a light for those who lived in pain, and lead them out of the endless, suffocating darkness. He recorded, stored, and organized the data, stained with his own blood, which later became what some called the First Emperor Data, or the First Emperor's Dossier. That is the end of the chapter. We have one more chapter today. If someone could let everyone know what page we are on for chapter 92. It is called He Was a Beam of Reclaimed Light. That's a good chapter title. From that point on, Xie Jingcheng worked around the clock conducting experiments, foregoing food and sleep, as if it was the only thing keeping his mind at peace. This was the only way he could feel that his life hadn't been completely destroyed, that it still had value. But the problem with constantly using his own body to perform experiments was that, even as someone who'd been perfectly repaired by RN13, there were still instances where it was impossible for him to withstand the physical pain. Even though patients with psychological Ebola had duller senses than ordinary people, this kind of bone-searing pain was still too much to bear. Xie Jingcheng always conducted these experiments without Qin Xian's knowledge. Until the day when Qin Xian came over to fetch something and inadvertently walked in on him using his own arm to test a new burn medication. That was when his self-destructive research methods came to light. Absolutely furious, Qin Xian immediately halted his studies at the research institute. Is your life not a life? He asked Xie Jingcheng. Who are you trying to torture acting like this? It doesn't hurt. The people who benefit from the results of your experiments will feel hurt, Qin Xian said, livid. Do you know why I rejected my friend in the United States? Do you know why I didn't participate in the research and development of RN13? It's obvious that this drug can save people, and it has clearly saved several experimental subjects, but I still think it's not a good thing. Do you know why? Because no medical experiment is more important than human life. Saving lives may be one of the purposes of scientific research, but not when it's founded on the blood of living people. Xie Jingcheng wrapped gauze around his wound before slowly lowering his snowy white sleeve. Then he rose to his feet, met Qin Xian's eyes, and said, But Laoshe, this is the only thing I can do now. Since I got sick, I feel like I've become a complete waste of space. I can't do any of the things that used to come so easily to me anymore. Can you understand how helpless I feel when my strength fades away, no matter how much I struggle to hold on to it? It's like facing time or gravity, facing everything that cannot be defied. I tried to get used to it, but I can't. My body is completely healed, but my heart feels like it's been rotting away ever since that car accident that should have killed me. I often wake up from my dreams and feel like my chest is hollow. I want to cut open my own chest with a knife and see what's still left inside. I feel like I'm just a dead soul borrowing a corpse to inhabit. I'm not useful for anything else besides taking care of my family." As Xie Qingcheng said this, he closed his eyes. "But I can't even take care of my family members properly. My sister is just a child, and I know she meant no harm, but she's told me on multiple occasions that she feels I've changed. She thinks that I'm—" Xie Qingcheng's voice choked up, and he paused for a long time before— why do I keep scrolling and losing my place? He paused for a long time before saying with difficulty, "She thinks that I'm not her Daga." At that point, no matter how much he tried to resist, the rims of his eyes still turned red. The reason he'd persevered and fought to stay alive to begin with was his baby sister. But now, even his little sister accused him of this. The girl was only 5 years old. She didn't calculate her words, she just said whatever she felt. Her verbal assault wasn't intentional. Rather, it stemmed from a child's distress and unease. Xie Qingcheng felt like he was stained all over with blood, like he was covered in invisible pathogens from head to toe. After a while, he stopped daring to even pick her up. At night, he sat dully by her bed and gazed down at that little living being through the hazy moonlight. She loved him. That was why her words cut him the deepest. It was like after the crash tore him apart. He'd painstakingly gathered up his heart from the bloodbath, and, cupping it in his hands, he'd sewn his destroyed body back together like he was patching up a tattered teddy bear. No matter how shattered he was, he still wanted to return to the girl's side. Covered in filth and obvious seams, that teddy bear crawled clumsily out of the trash and back to his home. He lifted his big hands and slowly beckoned toward the little girl he cherished the most. No one knew how much he'd paid for this chance to wave clumsily at her, but she said, "You're not him." She looked at that ragged cloth bear and said, "You're not Guga. Look at you. You're trailing loose threads. You're all torn up. I want Guga. Guga's whole and unharmed. Guga wouldn't be covered in such frightening wounds. Guga wouldn't scare me. I've returned from hell, but I think I lost myself," Xie Qingcheng said quietly. "I wasn't like this before my injury. Before, I never lost my temper with her. Before, I had the strength to carry her on my back all the way home. Before—" While Xie Qingcheng spoke, his expression remained largely blank. It made him seem very heartless, like he had no emotions at all. But now he trailed off, unable to continue. The back of his throat tasted unspeakably bitter. Qin Xian knew it wasn't that he didn't feel sorrow, but rather that his return from the gates of death had stripped him of the emotions he was owed as a human being. To stay alive, he had to constantly remain calm. Every intense emotion triggered his mental illness, and every time his illness flared, his condition worsened. That explains so much about him and his constant, extreme calmness and everything. Ugh, God, Meat Bun, he can't be a small animal without a home and a broken teddy bear. I know, right? Blue, case file of abandoned puppy dragon and tattered teddy bear. God. Xie Qingcheng paused for a long time. Then he said numbly, "I don't think there's any reason for me to keep living. I can't bring her happiness, and there's nothing of value I can give to anyone. I don't want to be a burden, but I also don't want to pass from this earth without leaving behind something meaningful. I was in such deep despair until you brought me to the lab. Until I discovered that my mind, my body, can endure an unnatural degree of stress. In certain areas of disease research, I can use this numb body to go further than anyone else. It really doesn't hurt, Laoshe. Blood and pain don't mean much to me. What scares me the most is the death of my heart. What scares me is not being able to do anything. To live is a complete waste of space. I don't want to be like that. He looked up to gaze at Qin Xian, and those peach blossom eyes seemed to be filled with great swaths of withered branches. Laoshe, I'm miserable. I don't want other people to go through the same misery. Last weekend at the lab, I met a child with brain cancer. He was very little, maybe 7 or 8 years old. His parents were heartbroken, but they refused to give up hope. Humans cannot defeat sickness, but the impossibility of victory doesn't mean we should give up without a fight. I don't want to succumb to suffering either. Maybe it's over for me, but at least in these invisible battles against disease, I can do what normal people can't. I think this might be the reason for my survival. For the next 20 years of my life. Even if I die, I'll die standing. Even if I die, I'll do the things that I ought to do. Laoshe, this is my reason to keep living. Blood seeped out from under the gauze. I'm very sorry for keeping this from you for so long. Qin Xian couldn't put a name to what he was feeling at the time. Anger? Heartache? Neither seemed to be an adequate word for what he was feeling. He thought, what exactly is life? What is the core that gives every person the supports to keep living? It was your existence and your values. It was the things that you did and the amount of passion you poured into them. Life was never about receiving things. That kind of support could let people live better, that's all. But no matter how many things you obtained, when it was time to dance with death, the Reaper would take away everything you ever had along with your decaying corpse. The things that remained on Earth, the things that could help you conquer death, that could only be what you put out into the world. That was what would separate from you upon death and remain in the realm of the living when you were gone. Those things originated from you. But because you selflessly offered them to the people of the world, they no longer belonged to you. Not even death could take them away. These were the mightiest feats that could be accomplished by the most insignificant of mortals. Xie Qingcheng had always understood this very clearly. For someone like him, becoming a useless good-for-nothing, unable to do anything or take on any responsibilities, was exceptionally painful. That kind of pain was more agonizing than death by 1,000 cuts. It tore through his heart, through his very core. So when he realized that he still had some value, he threw himself into his work at the Research Institute. He toiled day and night as he used his own flesh to light that lamp in the darkness. That was why he used his own body to conduct experiments. Qin Xian heaved a long sigh. Xie Qingcheng saw that the doctor's eyes were brimming with tears behind his thick glasses. What about your parents? Qin Xian gazed at him, gentle yet sorrowful. You said that you don't want to see the parents of children with brain cancer in pain, that you don't want to see other people suffer like you did. But Xie Qingcheng, can't you see those 2 pairs of eyes in the sky? You haven't been alone since birth. Your parents may be gone, but they once loved you so much. Never mind how I feel. If you treat yourself like this, how broken-hearted do you think they would be? The doctor walked over to his student. Their relationship kept secret. A conversation no one else heard. In this chilly laboratory, a merciful warmth thawed the cold. Qin Xian lifted a hand and stroked Xie Qingcheng's hair. Do you know why I did what I did? Why I disregarded the rules, the danger, everything, in order to save you? I've never told you, have I? In addition to my daughter, I also had a son. He died in a car accident. Before he passed, the last thing he said to me was, Dad, I don't want to die. Qin Xian closed his eyes. I'll never forget those words. or those eyes, for as long as I live. If it were possible to bring him back, even if he were in a vegetative state, even if his personality changed drastically, I would be willing to do anything. There's nothing more painful than seeing your own family die before your eyes. Xiaoxie, your parents didn't have a choice when they left this world, but you have one. You shouldn't debase yourself like this. Living well and experiencing all the beauty and vitality that the world has to offer would also be a meaningful life. Xie Shui is still young. The only reason she said those things is because she doesn't understand anything yet. Children are unembellished and forthright, but they also don't know how to express themselves perfectly. You'll always be the most important person in her heart. If one day you can no longer return to her side, she'll be overwhelmed with grief and helplessly lost. Seeing that Xie Qingcheng was about to speak, he shook his head, as if he already knew what the boy wanted to say. In a voice that was gentle and sorrowful, yet brooked no argument, Qin Xian said, I think I'm qualified to speak to you like this. I can understand your feelings. Over the course of our lives, you lost your parents, while I lost my child. Standing frozen in place, Xie Qingcheng saw the faint glimmer of tears hidden in the wrinkled corners of Qin Xian's eyes. After a while, the doctor's long-suppressed tears finally slid down his wizened face. If your parents were still alive, they wouldn't want to see you doing this, Xiaoxie. For your life to have meaning, you must first live well. From that day on, Qin Xian forbade Xie Qingcheng from studying at He Jiwei's biochemical pharmacology lab. He Jiwei was puzzled by this. He thought Xie Qingcheng was an extremely rare talent, and that it was a waste not to properly cultivate his abilities. But in the end, in accordance with Qin Xian's wishes, the young Xie Qingcheng thanked He Jiwei for looking after him and left his laboratory. Qin Xian created a cover story to conceal the experiments conducted by Xie Qingcheng, saying that they had been done on a theoretical individual. He misled everyone into thinking that the first emperor was a simulated person, and that the first emperor's data was just the result of computational studies. From that point on, Qin Xian kept an even closer eye on Xie Qingcheng, protecting him as if he were the son who could never come back. He could see how bewildered Xie Qingcheng was. After losing his direction once again, he seemed very lonely, his emotional state increasingly unstable. And Qin Xian would soon be dispatched back to Yanzhou for work. Before he left, he took Xie Qingcheng to an aquarium. Here we go. Qin Xian had pondered his options for a very long time, but sea creatures were often the best at healing people's hearts. This is a nurse shark. That's, yes, the one swimming in the furthest corner. That's a lemon shark. Like a loving father with his son, Qin Xian walked through the dark blue aquarium with Xie Qingcheng in tow, ice cream cones in both of their hands. Perhaps he really was just a loving father. As the waters glimmered unfathomably, as the interplay of light and shadow hazily unfolded, the one standing by his side became the son whom he would never get to see grow up. Finally, they arrived at the Jellyfish Palace. The walls in that section of the aquarium were all made of gleaming planes of transparent glass, with crystalline columns standing in the center of the hall. Behind that glass, drifting gently up and down, were thousands upon thousands of jellyfish. Xie Qingcheng's eyes widened slightly as he walked in. He felt as if he'd entered a primordial world, where creatures from 650 million years ago swam leisurely around him, their translucent, gleaming bodies pulsating gently. They were like willow catkins dancing in the wind, like snowflakes falling through the sky, like the first gleam of morning sun in early summer, or the last pool of flower petals in late spring. The magnificence of every season brewed within these organisms made of water. accompanied by the ethereal tinkling of the music box melody that played within the jellyfish palace. They drew people's hearts deep into the depths, to sink into the distant ice age, 20,000 leagues under the sea. Xie Qingcheng walked through the long, winding glass tunnel that glistened with rippling water, and for the first time since the onset of his sickness, he felt the return of a long-lost calm in his heart. It was nothing like the calm he forced upon himself. This calm was genuine and true, comfortable and relaxed. So pretty, he murmured, watching as a massive jellyfish floated past like a cloud of gray smoke. Qin Xian beamed at him. Creatures like jellyfish don't have brains, hearts, spines, or eyes. They're 95% water. Their lives aren't very long either, only a few short months. I didn't know that. Even the longest-lived deep-sea jellyfish only lives a few years. But look, their lives are so simple and carefree that they're an inherently beautiful sight. They make a lot of people feel extraordinarily calm just by looking at them. Do you feel that way too? Xie Qingcheng asked. Back when I was young, when I was studying in America, I'd go to the aquarium there once a month, for no other reason than to just find some peace amidst all that frustration. I'd sit down in the jellyfish section the moment I got there and stay the whole afternoon. Qin Xian's smile was tinged with nostalgia. So many years have gone by in a blink. The ticket taker at that aquarium even told me, if I couldn't find myself a wife in the future, I could come pick out a jellyfish free of charge to take home and marry. The aquarium would even officiate the wedding. Xie Qingcheng turned to look at him. Surrounded by the soft glow of moon jellies, like pure moonlight submerged in the depths of the ocean, he looked at Qin Xian and finally smiled. It was, oh God, okay, hold on, I just saw something. It was the first time since becoming ill that such a relaxed smile unfolded on his face. Thank you, Lao Qin. It's nothing, little devil. That's what little devil came from, is what Qin Xian would call him. No, we're not done yet. I just had to stop and process that. Qin Xian left, returning to Yanzhou. But Xie Qingcheng slowly found a working method to control his emotions. That was what his father figure taught him, the precious gift he'd given him. And so, just like Qin Xian had over 2 decades earlier, he often visited the jellyfish palace to watch these creatures from 650 million years ago. The young Qin Xian became the young Xie Qingcheng, the silhouettes of the 2 doctors overlapping within the world of countless drifting jellyfish. Whenever Xie Qingcheng felt his sickness getting worse, his senses going numb, his heart growing abnormally stifled, he would watch those jellyfish videos. They had no eyes. They couldn't see the light. They had no hearts. They couldn't feel heartbreak. They had no brains. Emotions didn't exist to them. They were creatures far more unfeeling than he. But they were still carefree as they used their bodies, which were 95% water, as ink to paint pictures capable of soothing human hearts. Qin Xian had said that the meaning of life was living well. These jellyfish seemed to be the best interpretation of living well. Day after day, time flew by. In the end, through his own efforts, Xie Qingcheng became extremely calm, composed, and peaceful. His status as patient zero of psychological Ebola remained unknown to anyone but the 2 of them. In certain aspects, you've already defeated this disease. As long as you continue like this without any more flare-ups, you'll be able to live peacefully until the age of 40, Qin Xian said. Or possibly even longer. That even longer was because the Americans had developed a new, highly effective medicine in their life science labs. Their research on RN13 had been halted by the continental legal authorities, as the people launched mass protests against their inhumane use of homeless people as test subjects in their clinical trials. Due to the pressure, the research institution destroyed their entire supply of RN13 and directed all their funding toward the treatment of patients who had been used as test subjects. Extending the lifespan of RN13 test subjects became their primary objective. Fundamentally speaking, RN13 borrowed metabolic cycles from the body's future balance, shortening the patient's lifespan each time it miraculously healed them. After years of work, however, they developed a sustained-release medication containing a compound that could significantly slow a person's metabolism. Ordinary people would die if they took too much of this medication, but RN13 test subjects could endure it. In fact, it could greatly decrease the rate at which their cells replicated, thereby extending their lifespans. And this time, the medicine's efficacy had been proven through repeated clinical trials. As long as you keep taking it, given your self-control, you'll be like any normal person. You could live into your 70s or 80s, Qin Xian told Xie Qingcheng. You might even live longer than me. The words normal person stirred something in Xie Qingcheng's heart. It had been a very long time since he last felt that those words were within his reach. Ever since he took RN13, he believed that he would never be able to live a normal, complete life again. What are its side effects? He suppressed the slight quaver in his voice. You really are no fool, Qin Xian sighed. But the side effects aren't unacceptable. Your reaction time, the sharpness of your mind, and other such abilities that depend on cell activation will all decline. However, you are very intelligent to begin with. If you don't take this medication, you'll be able to make extraordinary contributions, but if you do take it, your abilities will become less outstanding over time. But Xiaoxie, even if this treatment weakens your mind, you can still become an exceptional psychiatrist. But you can only be a doctor. You won't be able to keep extending your efforts to other disciplines as you did before. Becoming a prodigy in many different fields would be off the table. Why don't you take some time to think about it? Xie Qingcheng had already been admitted to the psychiatry program at the medical school. He planned to receive his bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees after 8 years of continuous study. He'd originally intended to devote his time each semester not only to a full course load, but also to continuing his research in biochemical pharmacology. He had already received Qin Xian's approval. His current state of mind was very stable. Even if he had trouble controlling himself every so often, he simply used his jellyfish videos to suppress those symptoms. The moment he saw those ancient floating life forms, he calmed down quickly, the edge taken off of his intense emotions. It was a reflex he had conditioned himself into. He would absolutely never use self-harm to advance his research again. That was why Qin Xian had agreed to his request. But with the appearance of a cure, Xie Qingcheng was once again pushed to a crossroads. Should he return to the ranks of normal people, give up his research, and settle on becoming a doctor? Or should he continue walking down this treacherous path, complete a mission that no ordinary person could achieve, and leave this world at the age of 40? He had to make a choice, but that was when it happened. Something that cut Xie Qingcheng to his core. That is the end of the chapter. That's where we stop for today. How does... Oh, Nina, we can look at the color image already? Okay, so that was a lot to download today. I I'm gonna look at the color image. If I don't do this after the stream, if someone could like post that in the Discord, that would be cool. And when we come back on Wednesday, we will be on chapter 93, which is called He Was a Person Hidden from Sight. Now I'm going to look at the color image. Oh, it's Xie Ching Chung with Chin Tian in the aquarium with the moon jellies. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, that was, no, it was something, huh? Oh, Blue, leaving aside that the Doctor was supposed to be a lot older, I really don't like how the artist who does inside art for these novels draws their proportions, though they're all off. I haven't noticed the proportions, but there is something kind of weird about the inside art. It's not, like, bad. I have seen worse 7C's interior art. But, like, there is something, like, a little bit off about it. But yeah, the cover art has been great. I'm just trying to process everything that we just learned. Well, yeah, I guess I didn't have to hold on to that one theory that I had for very long before it being proven that we, oh, Henry, you want to know which I think has the worst interior art? I can just tell you, because it's not like it's a secret, but, I think it's Mistakenly Saving the Villain. I do not like the interior art. There's something about it. It makes me, and I wish that it just was like the cover artist and the interior artist could just be the same. I don't know why they can't do that. 'Cause it's just in Missville, it's just really weird and I don't like it. um you think they uke-ify one of the characters a bit too much. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um oh, thank you, Nina, for putting the color image in Discord. So yeah. I thought that towards the end of this stream or the second half of the stream or something, we were going to get to them being saved from the flooding room, but we had way too much to download, so we're not even there yet. So I'm assuming that happens on Wednesday. I'm assuming there's not that much more of this backstory before something happens and they are rescued from the flooding room. Who knows how, but yeah. So thank you all for being here. I'm glad you could be here for the stream, Blue. They're still kissing the ceiling. Yeah, so I will see y'all on Wednesday. There's no way that they spoke about all this in under 30 minutes. Right, the timing maybe is a little off. But yeah, all right, I'll see you on Wednesday. Bye.